Hello, hello, ladies, lovelies, mystics, witches, sovereigns, who, however you refer to yourself, that practice spiritual freedom and independence, and that specifically celebrates and honors the God within, right? So I wanted to just say a couple things regarding the January 1st New Year kind of debate that's going on online and kind of seeing the different posts that's happening. And while I surely understand, especially as one walking on this path, and as I specifically dedicated myself to what I consider, like I said, spiritual freedom, independence, sovereign, divine embodiments journey, I did find solace in different times of the years that did not match up with the Gregorian calendar, right? So, of course, we know spring equinox and different things that does come up. But I've always said, even when I was practicing before and posting a little bit on YouTube and things of that nature, that energy is energy that is energy. And we can always find a way to alchemize and to transmute energy that is circulating in any date, whether it is manufactured, so to speak, or not, that has the whole world in some aspects celebrating something. Because there are people out of the country that also celebrate January the 1st just because it actually is celebrated in America, right, as a new year, and still honor their cultural beliefs as well. And that's something that we can do too. You can definitely tap into whatever energy activations, portals are out there circulating and around, and you can tap in a way, like I said, that alchemizes and transmutes that energy for your desires, your manifestations, your enchantments, your greatest good, however and whatever you say that as you choose, right? So I want to just say, while we know that typically, especially in some other systems, January 1st is not considered the new year, let's release this idea that we cannot still celebrate, right? Because as I said, across cultures, time has always been honored in cycles. There's lunar calendars, there's equinoxes, there's ancestral rhythms. The moon in particular has long guided renewal, especially through the divine feminine, waxing, waning, resting, returning, right? And when we look into like the year of the, whatever it is, the fire horse, right? That technically doesn't start until February, which aligns with the lunar calendar. So while there are many dates, and yes, January 1st does seem more manufactured, January 1st does mark a civil reset of sorts. There is an energy that happens there of governance and of structure. Which happens to be a shift in the structure, moving from the end of that particular calendar into the beginning of a new year calendar. And that might not necessarily feel like a natural one that your body is attuned to or in sync with the way we think about maybe spring equinox, for example. Or as I said, the lunar calendar specific for women who tend to govern and see their cycles sync up with the moon, right? But it's still something nonetheless. January is for reflection. It's for integration. It's for preparation. The new year that nature recognizes arrives typically with the spring equinox. And we know that's when the earth awakens, when life rises and momentum returns and our body starts to feel more in sync with that energy. So yes, if you are feeling still like you're in a period of resting, you are still feeling like you're in need of restoration, you're not necessarily feeling really highly rejuvenated this time of year, that completely does make sense, especially if your body is in sync with more nature-based cycles. Okay. So I'm not saying that. That does not mean we still cannot connect to and still honor what January 1st does represent. And being that we do operate, the majority of us right here in the United States, a lot of us on this calendar, regardless of what our deep inner beliefs are that we still bring into fruition, into manifestation, we still do abide by the calendar, right? For the most part, because we are in a society that does. And so it is completely okay to tap in that way. Honor the cycles. Honor the portals, honor the activations, honor the energy, honor the moon, right? Honor the divine feminine and the timing. However you mark it, it's just like you can still honor this time of the year as well as whatever you celebrate as your new year, especially since we even know once we get beyond that, right? Most of the time our birthdays is then considered another new year for people in some systems or dynamics and go, that's the true new year, right? For yourself. And so there's so many opportunities and places and spaces. And I'm one that's always just about connecting and tapping in the best that you can so that you give yourself the most energy, okay, in order to create, manifest, bring to fruition, whatever that is you are doing. As we know, the winter time, the dark time is definitely a time of going within. And so I do understand when we start to focus on, thinking it's the new year and it's supposed to be like new year, new me and all this energy, which is why a lot of times you make these resolutions and then within a few weeks they're null and void, right? You start going to the gym, you're still tired, you're exhausted. Yes, all of that because our body is not necessarily naturally attuned and in sync with this time of year as a new year. That does not mean though, because our body is not necessarily in sync with it from that count, that you can still not be in sync with it. You can still not be in sync with it mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and even physically, if you honor just what the winter represents as far as going within yourself. So I hope that helps anyone that's having some challenges with that or not. If, like I said, it's not about me changing anybody's mind. But what I do want to say is this. There is a space in spirituality where it starts to get, and it is not to say you get too spiritual that you can't blah, 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 blah. That's a whole rhetoric. I don't have to go into all that. But there's a space where you don't want to become the same thing that you left, meaning you do not want to become oppressive of somebody else's experience and their sovereignty and their freedom and their independence. Nothing wrong with educating, but we're seeing a lot going around social media these last few days that went beyond educating into, oh, this person is not woke yet. This person is, it went into a lot of different things with a lot of different, and it just goes, it crosses a very fine line of doing the same thing that traditional religion has done to many, which is being restrictive and oppressive. And we just want to make sure that we are not doing that in a spiritual community, regardless of your practices and your belief, especially if you are saying you are operating from spiritual sovereign and independence and freedom. We don't exert that over anyone else, right? So that was it for my message. I hope that whatever you are celebrating, okay, that it is aligning for you. And that you are being very intentional with the energy and very intentional as we move forward. Okay, my bad. So I also just wanted to highlight too that, it's no longer today, or it's today still somewhere. It's not the next day until I go to sleep, and I'm a night owl. So, but January the 1st, being that we are also in a 2026, which comes up to a 10, which breaks down to a 1, right? Was also a 111 day. So that in itself is also a very, powerful number, right? And that's another example of why I say tap in, connect. If it feels authentic to you, if it feels natural to you, you do not have to make your practices based upon what anybody else is doing or celebrating or what tradition is. When you are operating in spiritual sovereignty, you get to create this shit. It doesn't mean that there aren't certain guidelines that we do honor, and like as far as like universal laws and principles and things of that nature, right? That's not what I'm saying. But even when in those, some are mutable, some are not, right? So tap in and connect and listen to your own intuition and the inner goddess or God, the inner divine that is within. And if you do that, it will always be in alignment. It will always be alignment. So, oh, yes. I almost forgot. I also wanted to mention that we also have the first full moon of the year, which is a super moon, actually, which peaks on January the 3rd. So, that energy is already palpable. Like typically with the full moon, just to be safe, I always say that you can tap in 3 days before, 3 days after. You shouldn't have any difficult time kind of harnessing that energy in that time frame. For some that's a little bit more skilled, you can tap in outside of that. I'm not saying that. But for people that are a little newer to the journey, that tends to work pretty well where the energy is still very high. This is actually a wolf moon, and it has to do with encouraging listening to your inner voice, as I like to say, inner divine within your highest self, however you refer to that, releasing those old patterns, focusing on nurturing home, self, and relationships, strengthening community bonds, new beginnings. And so again, this all flows right in together, right? And so when you look at the 111 energy, the new year energy, the full moon energy, super moon energy, there's a lot happening right now. So again, go with what feels authentic to you and feels right spiritually and with your own inner discernment. Remember, you are co-creating, right, with the universe, multiverse, source, however, whatever, whomever, okay, that you honor or believe in. And so with that, you get to determine this for yourself. It is okay to step outside of tradition. And let's do so without being oppressive to others, right? Okay, that's it for real. That's all I have for today. Until next time, bye.